Hello, welcome to another episode of Capes, Cowls, Crusaders. I'm Kat, joined by Ernesto, and Scotty will not be here tonight because he got locked up in Arkham Asylum because, he's Scott. It's about time. Uh, how are you, Ernesto?
I am doing good, doing good. I may or may not have had a hand in him going to Arkham.
Mm, mm. Yeah, it's a group conspiracy. We'll just put it up to that. It's a mystery.
It won't hold in court.
No, we're not holding court. So tonight we are reviewing the absolute instant classic Batman story, The Long Halloween.
Okay.
Both the comic and the DC universe film.
Yeah.
When did you first read this comic, Ernesto?
I want to say I read it somewhere between 2011 and 2013, around the time and I pretty much said this during our early reviews, I started reading the DC Comics monthly with the New 52, where everything got rebooted. It was a fresh new entry for new readers. You didn't have to worry too much about continuity until it came back like 5 years later down the pike. But I decided to kind of do like a journey to Flashpoint and everything that led to the New 52. And people kind of gave me the recommendations of what I need to read, like what the essential DC comic storyline would be leading up to the famous or infamous Flashpoint that reset everything into the New 52. And one of those series was The Long Halloween. And because I like to, at the time, collect things, instead of buying a trade paperback, I decided to buy each single issue of The Long Halloween. And I did the same thing for its sequel, Dark Victory. But we don't have a Dark Victory to talk about, so we'll just settle for The Long Halloween. There it is. There it is. Yeah. And that was my first, I would guess, my first exposure to Jeff Loeb's writing, as well as where it's Tim Sale or Tim Sale, however people want to pronounce it, and his art, which is very unique. And although it's not entirely seen in this animated adaptation, you there are some subtle moments here and there where they kind of do infuse his art style in it. You just have to really pay attention to where it is if you've been used to his artwork ever since he started doing comics.
Yeah, I think I first read this story probably in 2009 when they put out that reissue of the trade paperback. Because everybody said, "Oh, it's The Long Halloween," and that's the one you have to read. That's what was mentioned on the behind the scenes of Batman Begins and even The Dark Knight. So it's like, I guess I got to see that or got to read this. It was very accessible. It doesn't really like there's probably ongoing things going on with the characters because it's sort of like a reimagining of Batman Year Two as a
Hmm.
pickoff from Batman Year One. But I love that this story, unlike say the Hush story, which we reviewed a month and a half ago or so, which was very linear, going scene by scene all the way through. Long Halloween kind of jumps around to different holidays and sometimes skips gaps of time, but it's like such a large ensemble that you just keep following all the subplots and all the different suspects, and it just keeps it like really fast, brisk pace and
Yeah.
rather exciting for it. Not that Hush wasn't exciting or boring or anything, but that one was a much more, a little bit tedious. Like it's each day, each scene, it feels like it's taking place over a short amount of time. Whereas a Long Halloween, it's like there's big gaps of time where it's like, I wonder what's going on in the investigation type of thing.
Yeah.
I love the artwork, especially the new. I just picked up convenient timing that I just got this in the mail within the last week. The the Jeff Loeb Tim Sale omnibus, which includes Haunted Night, Long Halloween, Dark Victory, and When in Rome, has very much glossier types of animation. Basically, just let's see, it's kind of good panel here to show you guys. It's part of some of my favorite animation too for a Batman comic.
Mm.
I wish I'd seen more of it in his
I
day.
think all those books you listed, I have them. I just know it's in single issues.
Right, then that's really cool. You managed to track down.
Yeah, they were all like, I mean, I didn't really pay much attention to the grading scale, but I always tried to get something that was 7.5 and over because that would at least the spine of the book would be intact, and that was always the important part, regardless of whether it looked worn out. So I want to say I paid somewhere between 10 to 15 bucks per issue at a time. Oh, look at that. That's beautiful.
This is reprinted on glossy, like sleeker paper instead of the newsprint that the other copy there that I have is.
Yeah.
So this is like really nice, shiny, and it's just really, the artwork really comes to life a lot more, I find, than on the newsprint. It doesn't feel like it has a haze over it, so to speak.
No.
And I wish that a lot of the reprinted stuff has been coming out with this nice glossy sheen on it instead of the newsprint. I wish they did it more often. It's like, here's another iconic piece here. So where we got like this one here, just the Joker reading the papers with a holiday killer. But this is just a really fun story from start to finish. I can see why so many filmmakers have been inspired by it, especially a lot of the story points infused into the Dark Knight and into the Batman.
Yeah, and especially, and you can always get echoes of it in the current storylines, especially with Batman. I mean, Jeff Loeb tried to redo it with Hush at the time by using the entirety of Batman's Rogues Gallery. Well, not the entirety, but a good chunk of it for each issue, including some heroes that we get to see in Hush. And I'm pretty sure Scott Snyder, when he did his Batman epic going through all the rogues, was also inspired by him. I mean, Scott, I would say he was more inspired by Frank Miller of all people, which of course, why not? He's the one who kind of changed the industry in a way when he did The Dark Knight Returns. But yeah, that entire run just still echoes to this day. And it's really the detective aspect of it, because just like Batman, you're trying to figure out, well, who's the holiday killer? Is it one of the rogues? Is it somebody we don't know? Is it somebody fresh? Is it someone within the crime organization? Because as we know, the moment that Batman came in, out with the old being the crime families, and with the new, we have Joker, the Riddler, Penguin, Harley Quinn, Poison Ivy. You know, it's a changing of the guard as you keep reading the Long Halloween, because they're no longer the threat. They're already the old crime family. And there's a new family in Gotham City, and there's only one head at the table, and that's the Batman.
Yeah, and it's like the introduction of the freaks, kind of like the passing of the torch sort of thing, and the questions posed in the comics whether there's a correlation between Batman's arrival and all these freaks kind of showing up. But yeah, it's like several iconic scenes. You can see how the movies repurpose it, such as Batman, Gordon, Dent, and the Dark Knight meeting at the Bat Signal to make their sort of trifecta official that we're going to take down the Maronis this time once and for all, which we have in the Long Halloween. You have the warehouse full of money that instead in the comics is Batman and Harvey Dent which burn it. In the movie, it's the Joker who burns it. Or you have the flashback of Carmine Falcone getting shot and seeking help at Wayne Manor, and Bruce watching his father operating on him from the stairwell, lifted part and parcel for the Batman. And so you get these kind of parallels and crossovers that are really neat. But I also, one of the things I really like about the Long Halloween is they sort of tell you who the holiday spoilers for those who haven't read it, but they sort of tell you who the killer is, but also killers, but they don't confirm all of it. It's kind of left up in the air a little bit to kind of figure it out.
Yeah, it's always about what came first, the chicken or the egg, when it comes to the holiday killer.
Right. And with that, I suppose I should first. I'm going to check to see if we have anybody in the chat to call out before I dive into this.
Make yourselves known. Step out of the shadows. I see you.
So far, I don't see any. I'm of course watching it on the streaming rooms, but I haven't seen any yet. So
they're being shy. They'll come around.
Yeah, they'll come around. All right. So
before you go into it, I mean, you mentioned that we see elements of the Long Halloween in the Nolan series, and also now with the Matt Reeves movie. We're never going to get a true live action adaptation of the Long Halloween unless somebody wants to do it just for the hell of it. Just throw $200 million into a long epic that would probably be over 3 hours if you want to really cover grounds. But I like to think that as far as more Batman movies come out, we're always going to get a hint of the Long Halloween. Just as much as we get a hint of the Pearls and Crime Alley, we are going to get the Long Halloween in some form or fashion, whether it's a flashback to the crime family or whether it's one of the new villains of Batman's Rogues Gallery. It's always going to trace back to the Long Halloween.
Yeah, and I don't even think you could do that as a movie faithfully, given the pacing of live action and stuff. I think it would have to be a miniseries to really do it right, so you don't feel, because like with animation, there's such a unique difference in the way they can pace things and get away with it. Like for instance, the first 11 minutes of a live action movie typically doesn't achieve much, but most cartoons, which have a fully fleshed out beginning, middle, and end, are told within 11 minutes, even though they don't necessarily feel fast paced, but they don't feel slow either. Feels kind of just right, like a movie. And so I've always found that kind of surreal how that works. So the animation, and they can get so much more done, but it doesn't feel like it's only been 10 minutes. But with a movie,
it's always a visual language. It's always a visual language, because with live action, we kind of already initiated into how things work. But with animation, it's a matter of, well, the only limits you have is how you can imagine things happening. So once that's all mapped out, you don't have to worry about the human error, as you might say. And then with animation, you can kind of like cover more ground, which is true. But at the same time, it's not exactly as easy as it seems, which is why an adaptation that we got here, it's pretty commendable, because they go for it. I mean, it's split into 2 parts, and they released recently last year. I believe it was last year, right?
Yeah, September.
Yeah, they released the entirety of it, just like they did with The Dark Knight Returns. And again, that was also a feat in animation as well. So I
Wow.
I like that they went and adapted the whole thing and didn't do a shortened version like most other people would do, because you get everything. I mean, yeah, there are some things that change here and there. It's been a while since I read the book, so I can't recall what the exact changes are, but I know there are some subtle differences here and there between the movie and the comic.
There are, but there's only 2 really huge differences in the narrative, and that has to do with the Holiday Killer's identity. And I kind of appreciate the reveal they go with in the movie for the final, which is very different from the book.
Yeah.
But it felt on point. It wasn't as much of a gut punch as finding out that Tommy Elliott wasn't Hush in the Hush movie. Even though I get why they did that in that movie. But I kind of like what they did in Long Halloween, because I've kind of accepted the fact that these animated movies don't really try and stick faithfully all the way through. They always are going to make changes somewhere, either because they want to or they need to for their continuity. Here, I felt that the changes they made, they didn't need to make. They could have faithfully adapted the story and still been faithful to their overall continuity. But yeah, it is what it is. They want to make it different so that you're not just seeing the same thing again. But the animation,
because if you want the same thing, you can just read the comic, and that makes sense. You want to make sure that it stands on its own while still being, I don't know, 90% faithful when you think about it. And this is, I want to say, unless I'm mistaken, this is the second, even though it's in 2 parts, it is the second entry into this new DC animated universe continuity, because before this, we got the Superman for Tomorrow, which reestablished Superman for a new continuity after Justice League Apocalypse War. And now we have the Long Halloween, and the thing that followed after this was Wonder Woman World War II. I think it was a Justice Society with Wonder Woman as the lead. Then you have Green Lantern, Beware My Power, and we're going to be getting Supergirl and the Legion of Superheroes this year.
Yes. And something called the Tomorrowverse I read.
And the Tomorrowverse, something like that, yeah. And so far, every single movie that is in this continuity is utilizing the same animation house. And just going to say right off the bat, I love the look and feel of this new universe. It's kind of reminds me of the Bruce Timm animated series, but more, what's the word I want to look for? It's more statuesque in a way than Bruce Timm style, but you can kind of feel like it's like reminiscent of it. And I want to say right now that Jensen Ackles, if he does have an opportunity to audition, he should audition for Batman Brave and the Bold. Just going to throw it right out there. He is age appropriate for the Bruce Wayne they're trying to look for that new live action movie. If they're going to be introducing Damian Wayne, who would be somewhere between 12 and 15, depending on how they want to age him, Jensen Ackles would be perfect as a live action Batman Bruce Wayne. And we've seen in The Boys that he's got the physicality to match it.
Yeah, some of the actors can make the crossover from the voiceovers to this, and we've seen it in other things too, like Katie Sackhoff going from voicing Bo-Katan to being in live action.
And she was Poison Ivy in this movie too.
Hmm?
She was Poison Ivy. She voiced Poison Ivy in this movie.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, so I could totally see her as Poison Ivy in the live action as well.
And there were a lot of celebrity names, some I haven't heard for a while, which jumped out at me in the cast credits for this.
Yeah, I think Jack Quaid was Alberto.
Yeah, and yeah, Josh Duhamel's Harvey Dent, and Kevin
By
DeVore.
the way, that's his best role in his career thus far, voicing Harvey Dent. I'm just gonna throw it out there. That's his best role. Like, the dude has been in a lot of things, and this is the one that I feel is his best work.
Yeah, that's true. He is really good at this. The one thing which did put me off a lot in the movie is I didn't like the casting for all the gangsters, like, particularly the Irish gangsters or Falcone and Alberto. It just kind of felt, I didn't care for the casting on those, but it kind of took me out of it a bit. But aside from that, it was very well cast. But yeah, the thing I love about this story is that it's not like too much into the crime lord type gangster stuff. It has a perfect balance of that and the theatrical aspects of Batman and the more comic aspects of it, and paces like really well, and that you keep all the subplots in league with each other, and you just keep thinking about, you're theorizing constantly with what's going on and what's the end game here, and I think they do it really well, balancing it.
And other voice acting here, we have Troy Baker, who is right now, I believe, the successor to the Joker voice in comic and video game adaptations and the animated movies. He's voiced Bruce Wayne as well, I believe, and Batman in the Telltale games and other animated ventures. But his Joker is, I don't think he's trying to do a Mark Hamill Joker impression, but sometimes you kind of blink and you miss it. You think you're listening to Mark Hamill in certain moments, and I like it because he's very versatile that way. You have Billy Burke as Commissioner Gordon, and that voice sells it to me.
That's the one I hated the most, actually. That just
didn't like it.
It did, because looking at the look of the guy and his age for Gordon, it just didn't sound. The voice sounded younger than he was, and it just felt very flat and bland.
I mean, it makes sense that it's younger because as we established here, the kids are still in their 5 or 6
but I mean, he's animated to look a lot older. Like, he looks as old as the Gary Oldman character from Batman Begins in the animation kind of.
Well, how old is Billy Burke?
I don't know. I'd never heard of Billy Burke before, but. And then another character, they had Naya Rivera, her final role actually voicing Catwoman.
Yeah, that is true. She died at 33, I believe.
Yeah, and the film's dedicated to her. Part 1 is. And then, speaking of which, we also lost Tim Sale last year.
Yeah.
Last June. That was too bad. I wish they did have more collaborations, because it's worth mentioning that the whole reason this story and this whole thing got started was because Archie Goodwin approached Jeff Loeb at a Comic-Con and said, "Hey, why don't you and Tim should do some more stuff together?" Because they'd already done like Haunted Night. And it's like, and what Archie was interested in was revisiting Harvey Dent before he became Two-Face, picking up after the year 1 stuff to kind of flesh that out a bit more and have a fun mystery type thing. And they both really went for it. So I like that just kind of was a spontaneous thing. It wasn't like some long brewing project. It's like Archie just said, "Hey, you guys are really good at what you did before. Let's do it again," and just put Harvey in there.
And Joe DiMaggio, he voices the Mad Hatter, who has done the voice of Joker in Under the Red Hood previously. So he has his own notch in his belt as far as voice acting is concerned. You have Alistair Duncan as Alfred Pennyworth, and I believe the guy, I always forget his name, I do apologize, but the man who voiced who's in Bosch and who was on Lost, he voices Carmine Falcone.
I never saw that series, so I don't know.
Yeah, he's more of a face than the name. Did you ever see the Transformers movies?
Yeah.
Did you see Age of Extinction?
Yeah.
He's the guy who says, "My face is my warrant."
I don't remember. I saw it once, like a year.
He's the older guy who's hunting the Transformers. He's the leader of the old. He's not.
I remember the character, but I can't remember the face.
He's the one who voices it. He's the one who voices him, and Also, going back to Billy Burke. So Billy Burke right now is 56 years old, and Gary Oldman was somewhere between 45 and 48 when he
Okay, so
started.
his voice just sounded a lot younger when he was voicing Gordon for some reason, and it just sounded really bland and flat. Like it didn't seem to match. But then again, I felt the same way about the gangsters. Like especially like when you're reading The Long Halloween, when they're interviewing, when Batman and Gordon are like double teaming Mickey Sullivan, which they changed to Mickey Chen in the thing.
Phrasing, people. Phrasing.
Yeah, when they're interrogating him, all of his dialogue is written in a strong Irish slang and Irish accent, and he's got this really flat American banal-like voice, and it's like, and the same thing with Alberto. It's like it didn't, because again, Alberto and all those are Italian, and Maroni sometimes speaks in Italian in the actual comic, but he sounds like nothing like that. So sometimes it was just a bit kind of off-putting, but whatever.
Sleep with the fishes.
Yeah. So I guess without further ado, I'll check the chat one more time to see if anybody's jumped in yet.
All right. And
yes. Oh, Scotty said Titus Welliver. You're right. It is Titus Welliver. That's the guy actor we were trying to think of a minute ago from.
Thank you, Titus Welliver.
Yes,
yeah, that's the one.
Titus Welliver. He is really good. I've seen him in a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
Let's see. All right, so I'm going to review the comic because I'll find that just easier to read than the movie, and I'll make the points where the differences are. But so the comic begins in October, and Carmine Falcone is hosting this big wedding party for his nephew, and he has Bruce Wayne there in his office, and he basically wants Bruce to help launder his dirty money, and Bruce is like, no thanks, I'm not really into it. Alberto keeps getting shoved aside at the party because he wants to get in with the family business, and the dad has no interest in that. We hear from over narration from Batman and from Gordon that Carla, who is Carmine's sister, was going to have her son, Carmine's nephew, Johnny Vitti, potentially testify against him, and instead Carmine is paying for his very lavish wedding, which seems to be possibly a buyout. We're not really sure at first. But before long, Bruce ends up back at Wayne Enterprises, and he's being confronted by Richard Daniel, who is on Falcone's payroll, and Richard wants to do business with the Falcone imports. He's like, it's going to be great. It's going to bring us in $350 million. You're going to love it. And Bruce is like, absolutely no, not hell no. And he ends up holding him off by buying out more of the shares in the company. And because Richard failed at this, he gets assassinated on Falcone's orders by Johnny Vitti. Meanwhile, we see that Bruce and Selina are kind of in a on-again, off-again quasi-relationship. They know each other rather well. Both as their alter egos, Batman and Catwoman, they sneak back into Falcone's house after the party and try and raid the safe. Catwoman makes off with a ledger. Batman gives chase. She ends up slipping them both, but what Catwoman doesn't realize is that Batman gets the ledger from her, takes it back to Gordon, and Gordon and Harvey end up meeting Batman at the Bat Signal, and they're talking about the Johnny Vitti murder, which has happened because Vitti has recently himself been murdered on Halloween night with a jack-o'-lantern left behind, and they said they like a baby bottle nipple was used as like a potential silencer. And the thought is that, oh, it's Falcone. He must have done it because he was going to potentially testify. To which Batman's like, well, I don't know, because Falcone just paid for this lavish wedding for the guy. Why is he going to do that? He already knew before then that this guy was planning to testify. He could have killed him before. And so Batman speculates.
He wanted the refund and the deductible. Yeah,
he wanted the refund and the deductible. He's paying it off. So Batman, Gordon, and Dent make this pact that they're going to take down the Falcones. They're going to do it as by the book as possible. But you can tell Harvey's a bit more glib about it. Like he even jokes at times that, like as the killings progress, he ends up joking that the holiday killer's doing their job for them and much better, and Gordon doesn't appreciate that type of stuff. But Catwoman arrives eventually, and she leads Batman to Falcone's warehouse, where we find all the money, all the dirty money that he can't launder. And Harvey's there with him, and he's like, wow, can you imagine if we were just two other guys? And Batman's like, don't. I know, but just imagine we could don't think about it, yeah. And so,
I mean, it's a lot of freaking money, Cat.
Yeah, I know, and even Catwoman didn't touch it, which I thought
says a lot. It says a lot when even Catwoman doesn't steal a piece.
Yeah, and so without hesitation, at that point, Batman just gets the lighter fluid and the fuel, and he burns the money, and they go home for the night. Meanwhile, we meet Harvey and his wife Gilda. And they're friends with the Gordons, and we learn that Gilda's a little bit depressed because Harvey's kind of becoming a workaholic. They want to try to have a baby again, but she isn't able to. They're Harvey doesn't seem to be under stress. He kind of likes the work, whereas Gilda's the one who's just really kind of depressed about all this. And Mrs. Gordon keeps assuring her that, oh, it's going to get better. Don't worry. Meanwhile, in retaliation for the money being burned, Falcone sends 3 assassins over to Harvey's house to kill him, setting a bomb to blow up the house. And supposedly in the comic, they trick you into thinking he's absolutely dead right off the bat. And Batman had tracked down one of the guy who made the bomb down into the sewers where he was hiding out with Solomon Grundy. And he dragged him into GCPD headquarters, and they did this brutal interrogation. And he's like, yeah, I may have made the bomb and made the parts, but I didn't deliver it. I didn't try to kill anybody, blah, blah, blah. And Gordon's like, okay, just send him back to the holding cell. But on the way back down to the holding cell, the lights go out briefly. And then the lights come back on, and it's like, what happened? We're not really sure at first. So Mickey ends up back in the cell with the other guys who were the getaway driver and the guy who actually hand-delivered the bomb to the dent's doorstep. But they don't reveal anything about who put him up to it or why. Mickey is taken back into Gordon's office, and it's revealed to be Harvey in like a Mission Impossible style mask. And he's like, yeah, they didn't give anything on Falcone. And Gordon's like, so what? Charge him anyway. They tried to kill you. They put Gilda in the hospital, and you're a district attorney, goddammit. And Harvey's like, it doesn't matter. They're going to make bail in an hour. I'm not going to do it. And he's like, well, you charge them, or I'm going to find someone else who can. And sure enough, they get bailed out in less than an hour, which doesn't bode well for them. And they go back to enjoy Thanksgiving dinner for themselves, and they're cheering, and they get mowed down by the holiday killer, who leaves behind a cornucopia decoration. Meanwhile, Gordon gets home late on Thanksgiving night to find that they've already had dinner without him. Batman, I'm not sure why he does it, but he brings a Thanksgiving meal to Solomon Grundy in the sewer. And so that's the Thanksgiving bit. Meanwhile, we jump ahead to Christmas, where the Joker is upset that this guy who's now been dubbed the holiday killer is getting more press than him, and he says the city's not big enough for 2 lunatics. So he starts going around aggressively interrogating the different crime bosses like Maroni and Falcone, and he raids this random family's house on Christmas and ties them up and steals other presents while singing to the tune of the Grinch. At one point, he goes into Harvey's house even and tries to attack Harvey. He says, like, I'm not the holiday killer, I know what you're doing, and brushes him off. While this is going on, the holiday killer murders Falcone's personal bodyguard of many years. And so they're trying to figure out, like, who's doing this, and Batman comes to suspect that maybe the Joker has something to do with it because he hears he's been breaking around people's houses. Mm-hmm. And so we fast forward to New Year's Eve, where the Joker, deciding that he's going to threaten, he has this weird idea where, the holiday killer could be anybody, and nearly anybody who's anybody is going to be in Gotham Square for the New Year's Eve countdown. So he's going to gas the city, or gas the square with his biplane, with his Joker gas bombs, which I guess is a carryover from the Batman '89 movie. So movies being inspiring the book, which is kind of cool. Batman foils the plan, and at first Batman thinks he might be the holiday killer, and he's like, no, I just want to know who he is, and I figure I got a 50-50 shot of killing him tonight. But Batman,
if I don't kill him, then I killed a lot of people then.
Yeah, then I killed a lot of people then. So, Batman puts a stop to it, locking him back up in Arkham. Meanwhile, on Falcone's yacht, there's a big New Year's party. Once again, Carmine brushes off Alberto and not wanting to have anything to do with the family business and kind of belittling him. He goes outside and stands on the rim of the ship and starts talking. Like in the comic, he's talking to Selena at this point and kind of hitting on her a bit. But then he gets shot, and we don't know who shoots him, and he falls into the water. And this is where one of the major deviations comes in the movie, where in the film they make it crystal clear that he gets chopped up to bits in the propellers at the back of the boat and dies, which of course is not what happens in the comic. He just kind of falls into the water, and there's speculation as to what happened. Gilda, meanwhile, is back home wondering why Harvey was late for their New Year's celebration, and comes home with his hair all wet, and she finds a gun in the basement, like a .22, wondering what's going on here, but she kind of keeps it to herself. We then jump ahead a few days to January 6th, where Falcone has been informed by the city coroner that his son's body washed up, and you better watch out. The seagulls have got to him, and Carmine has this huge public breakdown on the beach that he's lost his only son. We then jump ahead to Valentine's Day, where the holiday killer takes out a bunch of Maroni guards who are hiding out in a plainclothes, like a low-key car outside the front of his restaurant, which was Maroni's attempt of beefing up security after the Joker paid him a visit on Christmas. But the holiday killer takes them all out and leaves a present of like chocolates and roses behind. Meanwhile, Batman or Bruce Wayne gets sort of taken in under Poison Ivy's spell, and he reverses his decision to not launder Falcone's money, and that starts causing Harvey to suspect that maybe Bruce is in league with them. And that leads and he's under the spell for quite a while. It's not until St. Patrick's Day where the Holiday Killer strikes again, killing a bunch of more Maroni's thugs. And Catwoman, meanwhile, frees Bruce Wayne from the Poison Ivy's spell, attacking Poison Ivy at Wayne Manor. And Batman's happy that Catwoman saved him, but he's not really sure how he could repair. And he's starting to get suspicious of Catwoman too, because every time he's getting close to Falcone, it seems that Catwoman just has her eyes on him, and we're not really sure why. This leads us into April Fool's Day, where you have this great cross-cutting between the Riddler, who's been hired by Falcone to tell him who the Holiday Killer is, and Batman, who's in the Batcave looking at all the evidence from the crimes that he's gotten from Harvey and been allowed to kind of look at. And they keep going back and forth with their respective theories, where the Riddler suspects that, it could be the Catwoman killing these people so she could take advantage of the chaos to rip them off. It could be Carla, because she was going to put her son was going to testify to take down Falcone, and maybe she killed her own son once the plan backfired, and now she's trying to kill all them to cover her tracks. Or it could be, at one point he mentions it could have been Alberto, but now it's not. And they keep going back and forth with this. This is really neat. And at the end of it, Sophia comes in and just asks the Riddler. She wants to kind of kill the Riddler because it's like, well, who the hell is it then? But he doesn't really know. And Carmine's just frustrated. And he just doesn't want to kill him, so he just throws him out into the alley, or a bunch of bullets start flying again, but they miss him. And the Riddler's like, when does a killer not kill? And he kind of brushes it off as a, April Fool's joke, because it's April Fool's Day, so maybe he didn't actually intend to kill him type of thing. Meanwhile, we then jump ahead to Mother's Day. Or before we jump ahead to Mother's Day, Harvey confides in Gordon that he's suspicious that Bruce is in league with him and he intends to file charges and all that. And Gordon's like, this isn't really a good idea. But Harvey's like, well, you got any better ideas? And Gordon's like, well, not really. So then we jump ahead to Mother's Day, where Batman is now collaborating, or not collaborating, but sort of interviewing and taunting the Calendar Man, because he's like, you're the guy who's obsessed with holidays. You're obvious, and I've checked with the authorities. You haven't escaped Arkham, and you haven't been communicating with anybody, but certainly you know what's going on. And Calendar Man kind of taunts him and implies that he knows who it is, but he's not really telling. And while they're having this conversation, we find that Scarecrow has broken out of Arkham. Batman goes after him and tackles him. The Scarecrow fires back with his fear toxin.
And this is a big change in the animated, because in the animated, it's the Joker that escaped from Arkham, and in the comic is Scarecrow.
Right.
And might I point out a shout out to James Dasmalchian, who does a very good job as the Calendar Man in the movie.
Yeah, he does. He's really good. Perfect voice, just like I would imagine when I'm reading the book. It's just really neat. I like that Calendar Man is kind of like the perfect criminal informant for this type of story. It just makes sense. Yeah. So the Scarecrow uses his fear toxin on Bruce to get away. This causes Bruce to relive the nightmare of his parents being murdered, and he flees through the streets, and Harvey and Gordon end up cornering him back at the cemetery, where you have that iconic sheet of him like embracing the tombstone of his mother. Meanwhile, Sophia has tracked down the manufacturer of the gun, or somebody who she believes is next in line for the manufacturer, and she's interrogating him, holding him over a bridge, saying, well, where the hell did the guns get made? And he tells her it's a shop in Chinatown. He's like, let me go. She's like, okay. And she drops him into the river, apparently to his death, and she then leaves her own little hit squad to go over to this gunsmith, only to find that the Holiday Killer beat her to it, killing his own gunsmith, which is kind of his or her own gunsmith, which is kind of interesting.
By the way, for those who haven't read this woman is a big person. She is very intimidating.
Yes. And so that's the next victim of Holiday Killer. We then jump ahead to Father's Day, where we have the flashback of Falcone coming to Thomas's house, having been shot. Thomas is helping him, and Falcone, the son, is offering money. He's like, look, I could pay. The father is offering him money, saying, look, I could pay. You're a million. I get you're a billionaire. You don't really need money, but I can give you anything. And Thomas is like, no. He kind of brushes it off like he doesn't really want anything, and just wants to focus on saving the patient, which he does while Bruce is watching from the stairwell. And
it's a Hippocratic oath. That's why he doesn't need the money. And
exactly.
He has an oath.
Yes, and in the animated movie, Bruce actually comes down the stairs and talks to Carmine briefly, but
yeah.
In the comic, he just kind of stays up there and watches. And Harvey has taken Bruce into custody, and at the grand jury hearing, he puts Alfred on the stand, and Alfred's kind of like telling him, well, yes, Thomas Wayne fulfilled a Hippocratic oath to save this guy, but and then he didn't want anything, and Harvey's like, well, why didn't he file a police report? He just helped this criminal who got shot, and he didn't file a police report that hey, there's been an attempted murder. And Alfred implies that, well, maybe he did file. I think he did file a police report, but hey, the police were corrupt back then. There's a lot of grafts, so I guess that's on you. And Gordon's sitting in the wings, just going, "Oh God, that's going to cost us."
Yep.
And so they have to let Bruce go because by now Bruce has used his army of lawyers to disband the money laundering scheme that Poison Ivy is revealed to have initiated at Falcone's behest. Meanwhile, we catch up with what everybody else is doing on Father's Day. Gordon goes home to find a Father's Day card, and he's been given a tie that has like the handprints on it, and he's like, "Oh, what a great present." Harvey is sallowing in his basement, remembering his father, who's apparently become mentally ill, and he has this double-sided coin that he's been left with. Sophia goes to give her father, Carmine, a present, but he's too distracted with business, and he kind of half-assedly kind of thanks her for the gesture, and she's kind of a little bit miffed by that he's not really paying attention. And meanwhile, in a clear homage to The Godfather, yes, Salvatore Moroni goes to visit his father in his tomato garden, and Luigi Moroni at this point is the guy who was behind the attempted assassination at Carmine from the flashback, and he's like aging, and he's talking to him that you got to take down the Roman. He's like, it doesn't matter. Whoever this holiday killer is, he started targeting the Romans. Now he's moving after your guys. He's like, I think it's just a ploy of Roman getting rid of his own rivals within his own family, and now he's going after you. You got to take out the Roman. You got to do it now. And then instead of dropping dead of a heart attack, is what happens to Vito and the Godfather, Luigi gets shot by the holiday killer, and Moroni's left cradling his dying father in his arms.
Oh no!
Yes. Bruce, meanwhile,
I had to. There was a Luigi joke ready to go.
Bruce, meanwhile, goes back home and he starts lamenting the fact that his father ever saved Moroni that night. And he ends up sitting in the same spot at the stairwell, looking back at the dining table, speculating with Alfred, how many things could have been different, because as Alfred had told the grand jury, in this continuity, Joe Chill was not necessarily the murderer of Bruce Wayne's parents. It was never found out who did it, which is of course another thing that Matt Reeves homaged in the Batman. And so Alfred just tries to put those thoughts out of Bruce's head, saying, look, everything could have been different, and maybe I could have raised you differently, things would have been better, but we just have to work with what we have. And so then we jump ahead to Independence Day, where the holiday killer kills the Gotham City coroner who handled Alberto Falcone's case. Bruce, meanwhile, was out on the docks with Selena Kyle watching the fireworks when this happened. And she was basically trying to coax him into leaving Gotham City. She's like, hey, I know all sorts of places. I got some money stashed away. It'd be great. And he kind of brushes her off. He doesn't really want to do it. The bat signal comes on, so he goes down to the docks, and Gordon's like, well, I don't get it. Why the coroner? What's this about? And he's like, well, can you verify where Harvey Dent's been? Because Gordon is, on the one hand, has been suspecting Harvey for a while of the holiday murders, but Batman is reluctant to accept it. He keeps pushing this off, but now he's asking, well, could the coroner have somehow been able to verify it? Like, he doesn't really know what this particular murder was about either. Meanwhile, Sophia goes to see Carmine and expresses her frustration that, dude, why are you turning to freaks? Why aren't you turning to your own family? Like, you hired all these people, like you hired. Oh, that's right. I forgot to mention that he had hired Scarecrow and Mad Hatter, having them broken out of Arkham, to rob the Gotham City Bank to help recoup some of his losses. But Batman and Catwoman had put a stop to that. And he's like, why are you hiring them? You hired the Riddler to try and solve this. You got the Joker's now on our tail. Like, what the hell are you doing? And he's just kind of brushing this off. He's like, no, we got to deal with this our own way, type of thing. So then we kind of head to the Roman holiday, which happens to be Carmine's birthday, and they're all kind of celebrating that. Carla is now getting suspicious of who she thinks the holiday killer might be, goes to the coroner's office to snoop through the reports, and then she gets offed by the holiday killer. Meanwhile, around this time, Gordon really puts his foot down, stating all the evidence that he thinks that Harvey is probably the guy, saying, look, we have to do something about this. And Bruce doesn't really want to believe it, since Moroni, as I forgot to mention, Moroni did turn himself in on Father's Day, saying that because of his own father's murder, he was done with this. I'll turn state's evidence against Falcone. We have to stop this, because he thinks that his father was right. You got to take down Falcone. And so it happens to be on the Roman holiday that the big testimony from Moroni is being held. And during the trial, Maroney is on the way into the courtroom. He gets a gift from Vernon, who we know is on Maroney's payroll. Vernon being Harvey's assistant in the district attorney's office, and Vernon gives what is allegedly cough medicine or something, or stomach medicine for Maroney, but it ends up being acid, which he sprays in Harvey Dent's face, saying, "You're done, Dent. That shit'll eat through cement. Did you really think you had me that easily? Ha ha ha." So Maroney gets taken away. Harvey gets taken to the hospital, where apparently he snaps and kills his own surgeon and vanishes. And then the Roman, meanwhile, Carmine celebrates his birthday back at home. And so we then fast forward to Labor Day, where Harvey has been missing for over a month now. He's taken refuge in the Gotham sewers with Solomon Grundy, who for some reason Solomon Grundy can only say the beginning of the rhyme. Solomon Grundy, born on a Monday, and Harvey just runs through the rest of the rhyme. And Solomon kind of listens to him on this front. He's saying this. Batman goes back to Arkham Asylum to interrogate Calendar Man, saying, "Come on, this is all bullshit. What's going on?" And he's like, "Well, you know that it's a holiday today, so he's probably going to go after your next big guy. And who's the next obvious target? It's going to be Maroney." And so then Batman comes up with a plan, which again is alluded to in The Dark Knight, where instead of Gordon disguised as a SWAT guy, it's Batman disguised as a SWAT guy. And instead of moving Harvey down to county, they're moving Maroney down to county, and he gets ambushed and killed by the Holiday Killer in the process. But Batman catches the Holiday Killer and unmasks him as Alberto Falcone, which is a shock. And we find out that Alberto killed the coroner to cover his tracks. He killed his aunt because she was getting close to discovering the truth. He takes the fall for all the murders, saying that it was basically because he felt undervalued and underappreciated, that he basically wanted to prove his worth and destroy the Roman Empire that he was never going to be allowed to inherit. And everybody in the public is willing to accept that explanation, hook, line, and sinker, and they just kind of believe it. And Carmine is really upset to learn this. And Batman thinks that there's no way that Carmine, and Gordon, by the way, also thinks there's no way that Carmine didn't know that Alberto was alive. And he suspects that his public meltdown on the beach was something put on for the Holiday Killer to think he succeeded. He's like, "No, there's something fishy about this." But Carmine's really upset that Alberto didn't come to him for help, and that this has all been taken to this level. And then time passes because it seems like the case is over with. And we come to Halloween, where the Gordons are meeting with Gilda on Halloween, and they're comforting her, like things. She's just misses Harvey and wishes he was back, doesn't know where he is. And that season over the holidays, and we find out eventually that same night that Solomon Grundy and Two-Face on Halloween night break a bunch of inmates out of Arkham Asylum. And they go to Falcone's headquarters, killing it using like his Joker gas or whatever to kill the guards. And Falcone finds in his office, he's got the Mad Hatter, the Scarecrow, Poison Ivy, Penguin, who making his first and only appearance in the story, the Joker, and Two-Face, Solomon, and those guys. And they're all sitting there. And Carmine's like, "What the fuck is this?" And he's like, "I'm dealing with this my way, Carmine. This is my city." And he's flipping his coin. And Batman shows up and he's like, "You can't do this, Harvey." And he's just telling him off like this is all bullshit. But then Harvey kills Carmine Falcone anyway. Sophia freaks out and tries to lunge for him, and Catwoman dives in the way, knocking Sophia out the window to her apparent death. And then Harvey manages to help with the other villains fight off Batman and escape while the other villains got successfully subdued. Harvey then goes back to the district attorney's office and kills Vernon for his betrayal. And then he turns himself in at the bat signal on the rooftop. And Gordon's like, "Why'd you do this, Harvey?" He says it was the only way. And Gordon's like, "I refuse to believe that." And he's like, "Whatever, Jim, it had to be done. It's my city." And he's like, "Fine, cuff me." So they cuff him and take him away. And Gordon asks Batman, "What do you mean there were two Holiday Killers?" He's like, "Well, he killed Carmine Falcone and Vernon on a holiday. So he was the last Holiday Killer. We could surmise that." So he kind of lets it drop. And as he jumps off the rooftop, and Gordon's like, "I can't. I have to believe in the city." He chooses to keep believing in the good of Gotham City. Whereas Batman, as he's taking off, says to himself in his narration that he still has to. He wanted to believe in something better that he thought was going to be Harvey and their triumvirate. But he says, "No, I'm going to believe in me. I'm going to believe in Batman to save the city." And then we go home and find the big clincher, which is that Gilda, the widow of Harvey Dent, is the one who committed the murders. She committed the murder of Johnny Vitti on Halloween. She murdered the people who tried to blow up their house on Thanksgiving. She also murdered Falcone's bodyguard on Christmas. And this was because she knew, with inmates constantly escaping Arkham with the tight hold that Falcone had on the city, that this mob war and this job was going to take over their lives. There was never going to have any personal time with him. She was going to sink in depression, and nothing was going to change. And so she murdered these people to try and spur things on, but that she suspects that Harvey may have killed or tried to have killed Alberto on New Year's Eve, but she's not sure. And that she figures from there on out, Alberto and Harvey were kind of collaborating and tag teaming, but she's not really sure, and they never really confirm it. And she ends up burning all of the evidence that she had in the basement, which she had previously accused Harvey of stockpiling when, and even Batman, when he was looking for Harvey in that month he was missing, started accusing her of it. He's like, I don't know what all this shit is, but now she's burning all of it, saying that, I believe in Harvey Dent. And it's kind of neat because it's like, okay, so Gilda started this whole thing, but we're still not sure if she's correct, because on the one hand, we get why Alberto would want to take the fall for everything. He wants to be in the limelight, and you actually have him and Calendar Man taunting each other in Arkham towards the end. Mm-hmm. But we're not sure if, did Harvey actually go to the yacht and shoot Alberto and think he killed him, and maybe that gave Alberto the idea to play dead for a while, kill the coroner and his aunt to get him out of the way, kill Maroni for his own glory. Did Harvey commit those other murders on Valentine's Day and St. Patrick's Day and Mother's Day? It's like, we don't really know. And I kind of like that. It's still up in the air as to who did what during the second part of the spree.
Because at least in the comic, you can at least surmise that they all have those motives. And that's why you can't really pin one or the other.
And one of the other recurring motifs is that every time they go back to the Dent's house, you'd see Gilda cleaning the baby bottle tips and leaving them in the window to dry off. Mm-hmm. And certain murders in the animation and the comic, you would tell that it's obviously the baby nipple thing in the first three instances. But in other instances, it wasn't really clear from the animation, which was deliberate. So that was kind of neat. And the big change that the movie makes is that it wasn't Alberto. He did die on New Year's Eve. And that Gilda was actually the holiday killer pretty much the whole time, because she and Alberto had actually had met and fallen in love back in college. They had an affair. She got pregnant. Carmine got upset because it wasn't during wedlock, so he forced her to have an abortion, and she got sterilized in the process, couldn't have another kid. And that's when Alberto was basically excommunicated or not excommunicated, but totally shamed and humiliated and not allowed to be involved in family business. And that she eventually met Harvey Dent for the sole purpose of helping him in his war on crime to take down the Falcones to get revenge, which I admit is kind of a neat idea, but it does feel a bit like explain-a-vision at the last second in the story. Like, I didn't feel like that was a really long-winded thing for her to do, and it doesn't really match her feelings of depression earlier in the film, but I get it's kind of a neat change, I guess, but not really a necessary one, because then it sort of strips away some of the mystery, because in the movie, they seem to make it more clear that she was the one who was doing it the whole time, but Batman kind of lets her off the hook at the end.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure why he let her off the hook, because she kind of told him why she did it and that she did do it.
I'm not a lawyer, but maybe there's a double jeopardy here, or maybe it's a situation where enough damage has been done and bringing her in wouldn't really matter at the end because it's pretty finite. But I think, or maybe he did it out of respect for Harvey and let it be. It's one of those things where it's one of those cases where it's not the case that was solved the way he wanted it. It's probably one of his failures if you think about it, because it kept happening over and over and over again. And at this point, he's just like, okay, I'm going to have to change things up. I thought when I came here, I was just going to clean it up and walk away, but I can't just walk away. And he's probably giving her an out, even though he doesn't like it. And it's not the first time Batman has confronted people like this, and in the movies or in the comics, where he knows their dirty secret. He just can't bring himself to either do it, or there's just no point. Not that it's the best answer, but that's how I've always looked at it. That it's just like, it's kind of like, I know this is veering way off topic, but it's kind of like identity crisis. Everybody knows, they just choose not to address it. And for those who've read Identity Crisis, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, so it's kind of like, going back and forth with it. Oh, hey, Edge of Time in the chat. Hello. Thanks for watching. So, yeah.
For the Edge.
Yes. This So this story, I really loved it because again, it keeps you guessing all the way through. They do a really great job at ironing out the characterizations, particularly of Gilda and Gordon.
Yeah.
And Harvey, I like that this version of Harvey is not really afraid to be very kind of flippant about how he's kind of, hey, let's give the holiday killer a medal type of thing, you know? And so it does kind of beg the question, well, is he really that flipper? Or did he actually do it? Because like in other adaptations, like say in Batman Forever, Two-Face, it's just the Two-Face personality pretty much. We're not really getting Harvey there. Whereas in The Dark Knight, he's kind of embracing the whole White Knight thing, and the reason they nicknamed him Two-Face is because he's a hard ass behind the scenes, but a hard ass with his heart in the right place. Whereas, you know, here it's like Harvey's kind of walking that line, like when he teases Batman that, hey, we could take some of this money, you know. And
but it's also relatable because most people who kind of follow these kind of true crime stories, they do make flippant comments like Harvey does. They do have that moral question of, I mean, who's going to miss all this money just because it belongs to a criminal? Who's going to miss it? The police want that money. That's why.
That's what I liked.
It's illegal tender. That's why.
That's what I liked about it. That he's kind of like, they reasoned initially at the warehouse that, you know, if we confiscate this money, it's going to take a while. They're just going to get it back.
Yeah.
And then in the movie, he actually flips a coin to decide whether or not they're going to burn it. But I wouldn't have put it past Harvey. Because at one point, Gilda asked him when they get their new house after the first one was blown up. She's like, "How can we afford this?" He's like, "We can't." And so I thought, did he steal some of that money, like a couple duffel bags worth before they blew it up?
Probably, yeah. But it also helps tie up why Catwoman was so invested in her involvement because of her ties to Carmine Falcone. You know,
that's actually the big lingering plot thread from the comic, is that they don't tell you why she was like, because Batman keeps confronting her a couple times in the story, saying, "Why are you always here? What is your beef with Falcone?" And she keeps saying, "Mind your business," but they don't reveal that until the sequel, Dark Victory. Whereas in the movie, Long Halloween, they kind of tie that up sooner.
True, but for those who've read both and in subsequent future sequels, especially in Catwoman Solo, where she became a crime boss, because she was later revealed that she was not just a Falcone but also a Calabrese, and that's inside baseball for those who read comics. She does become a mob boss in her own right, and it kind of makes sense that she would ascend to that role given her relationship to the Falcones and everything. But at least in the movies, when you already have that information, it does make sense why she's going after Falcone. And when you look at the Batman as well, they tie it up as well to her relationship.
That's right. That's another big pickup from the Long Halloween, is the whole Selena Kyle.
Another changes that they did make was in the comics, her costume is still very cat-like. Sometimes she actually does have a tail tied to her suit. Other times it's just the whip that she has, and it's just happens to look like a tail. And she does have whiskers and the cat ears just to make her look like, oh, she's a Catwoman. But for the movie, they kind of updated to how she looks in the current comics, which is black latex and more appropriate when you think about it. Because in the comics it's more of a fetish. Here, I mean, you can still consider it a fetish, but her actually dressed up as a cat, the way they make her look in
because she even says several times in the comics, she says meow or meow or whatever things.
Now granted, she still does it in the comics, but because she just likes to poke fun, and when she's around Batman, it makes sense that she does do those cat puns. I mean, hell, even in the most recent comics, when she walks into a giant vault full of priceless artifacts, her reaction is meow.
Well, she and Batman also know who each other actually are in the comic and the film, right?
Not sure in the comic, but in the film they definitely do. They do away with that real quick.
Yeah, because remember in
the Hush storyline, that's when it was a big deal that he revealed his identity to her.
That's right, because in the story, but what does that's right, because the Hush is still the Jeff Loeb continuity, because that says
exactly. So they do know each other. There might be some suspicions, but they never really go into it. And because they're two different people, that's why their relationship never works. I mean, he does date her in the comics, but it never really works out because, you know, the obvious reasons. They're just two different people. and they always have this will they, won't they? They always have this, well, I have a mystery man that I'm dating, or he has a mystery woman, and they're always like, even when they're in costume and out of costume, they're always playing cat and mouse.
Yeah, right, because in the movie she takes him back to Wayne Manor when she finds him in Crime Alley, whereas in the comic it's kind of back and forth. Like, because on the one hand they have this near identical conversation in the comic where it's like on 4th of July, Bruce and Selena are talking, and she's pitching the idea that they could go off. She knows places, blah blah blah. And then later in that same holiday, when she and Batman meet as Batman and Catwoman, she basically gives the same spiel to Batman, using pretty much the exact same dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of, I think, clear where Batman already knows who she is, but she didn't necessarily know who he was at that moment. But it seemed kind of like they were going with that direction.
Yeah, with Batman, it's always the interesting part because he already knows, but he has to pretend that he doesn't, which kind of makes him more endeared to her because it's like, damn, I really do like her, but I can't go there.
Yeah, and so so I really did like this comic. One of my favorites. The pacing is there, and then it's written in such a way that you don't really notice that certain things are amiss. Like, for instance, shortly after the Riddler, like even as early as Mother's Day, he already knows that people know that the Riddler was the one who was going to get shot and didn't. But it takes until the Roman holiday when Batman actually tracks down the Riddler to his hideout and to find out, like, hey, what happened, you know? And it's like he wouldn't have waited that long, but it's written in such a nice way that you're not really thinking about that because there's so many other plot threads that you're following, which is pretty cool. And then I get how you could tell that it's also written for the weekly or the monthly comic issue, because every time you meet Falcone, it has the same Batman narration saying who he is and orienting you with all the different crime bosses or crime people and which families they're affiliated with each time they show up in the comic. I'm like, okay. But I guess that's necessary when you're doing a monthly comic thing, and they all kind of, most are animated, look the same. And
it would cost more money, and it would cost a lot more to kind of rearrange it, and might as well just leave it as is.
Yeah. And then we also saw that Sophia and Salvatore were having an affair as well, which is a great red herring as to, hey, are they in on it type of thing? Take down the Falcones and inherit it all for themselves. So yeah, it's like the book is never short of red herrings. It's never short of good suspects, and I love that they don't really tell you who it actually is. And it's just paced so well with so many plot threads that it makes it a really great read. And I wish there were more Batman stories like that.
Yeah, I mean, they're always going to be. It's one of, sometimes, at least lately, you can tell just how different comics are now than they were back then. Because the comics now are more bombastic than actually letting the dialogue speak for itself. Whereas in The Long Halloween, Dark Victory, and subsequent sequels after that, they do let it be more of a drama than it is an action.
Right.
You're more invested in the character development than you are the boom, pow, wham, bam.
Come to think of it, the Batmobile doesn't even make an appearance in The Long Halloween in the comic.
And that's where you get the difference with the movie, because the movie is trying to make sure that there is a beat here and there, and that's why they kind of rearrange it. Like when you have a Jimmy Chen, prior to that, you have an action scene in the alley with his bodyguards, and then you cut to the Thanksgiving kill. You have the car chase. You have more in your face Batman with more of the criminals. So it kind of just because you're adapting it, nobody's gonna sit and just watch people talk. You need to throw some action beats. Where in the comics, you do have that patience because you're kind of like being teased until you get to the meat of it.
Right. So yeah, because you're right about that. Because reading there are other great Batman stories. Obviously, like I love the Tom Snyder run and Tom King runs, Scott Snyder, Tom King, but those are also a bit more linear. Like there's not as much different stuff going on in each issue or each trade paperback volume. Whereas The Long Halloween just was able to balance all these different storylines so well. I can't imagine how much more discombobulating it might have been to have to read them one issue at a time over the course of the year that it was published. Whereas here it's like it's a breeze. I mean, I read it much faster than the movie is long.
Yeah, it's again, it's just how it's a different world, especially with how they were because imagine just getting this book for the first time. You have no exposure to Batman stories that are out today. You read this and you're getting it monthly, and you're probably just salivating at what's going to happen next, what's going to happen next, what's going to happen next. So imagine being at a comic book store back then, people just rushing through the door just to buy the next issue.
I know, and it's like, how long's it been since it's been a Batman story like that? It's
Yeah.
like,
Suddenly it's no longer just your typical Batman story.
right, and I feel that Dark Victory doesn't get enough love because, I mean, admittedly that's a similar motif. In that one, it's the Hangman, but I thought that was an equally compelling story, a great mystery that also is juggling multiple storylines and kept it entertaining. I mean, I think they could have beaten it up a little bit with
And your reintroduction to Dick Grayson as Robin and that relationship. And I think after that you get Robin and Batgirl year one, and they're reestablishing that new continuity or a new interpretation of that introduction.
and then you have the co-lead story, When in Rome, by
Mhm.
Catwoman, which takes place concurrently with Dark Victory, where you
Yeah.
find out what's going on there. And I thought that was, I'm surprised that maybe if they were interwoven in the same series, it'd been received better. But I mean, more often than not, I kind of feel people are kind of dissing on it. Whereas I really love Dark Victory. I think it's a great sequel, but I don't get the sense that they're gonna make an adaptation of that in the animated side of things.
I mean, since we do have a new continuity, they could, because Robin hasn't been introduced yet that I know of.
Well, okay, they might then. Because I figured they would have kept the Catwoman thing a mystery. Because that's one of the big reveals in Dark Victory, where you find out one of the big selling points of the story is you find out what Catwoman's interest in Falcone was that whole time. Whereas in the movie, The Long Halloween, they already tell you. So I thought maybe that might be an indication that they might not go through with it, or I guess maybe they'll change it up.
Maybe because the Batman was coming out, they might as well just do it.
Yeah, it's true.
I mean, once you have one version of it, nothing after that is going to be as special. So you might as well just change it up a bit.
Hmm.
Because I have to imagine the people who were working on this were already keenly aware of what the script for the Batman was going to be. So they might as well might as well just change it here and there.
Yeah, that was a great when they used that in that story as well. So
Now we've had what? We've had 3 versions of Carmine Falcone, or 4, maybe 5, whether it's an animation or live action. Which one is your favorite up to this point?
well, I like the comic book one from The Long Halloween, my favorite. After that, I'd say, I mean, I really liked what Tom Wilkinson did at Batman Begins. I thought he carried a lot of like heft and intimidation factor for that character, even though they didn't really get to do much because the focus wasn't really on him. And maybe whereas I kind of felt similarly about John Turturro because he was more understated. And then some of the voice work just kind of bugged me on the animated side, but I gotta stick with the comic book version of Carmine Falcone. It's my favorite, especially the way they animate it, like when he's in his dark office and it's like they're doing the whole Godfather thing, but you actually feel it with this guy. And I'm thinking, man, this guy's gonna juggle all this bullshit with his family and the holiday killer, and the fact that his sister runs Chicago and is trying to, potentially muscle him out to take over Gotham. And it's like, this is really, I liked how they portrayed that character. Like at one point, even when Batman's looking for Harvey in that month after he disappears, he goes to Falcone's penthouse and attacks him, and Falcone just unleashes on him, saying, "Look, this is your fault. You're the one who started the Long Halloween. You should have caught this bastard earlier. Instead, you and Dent and all them tried to focus your efforts on us. I mean, you should have been going after the holiday killer." And when Sophia barged into the room and asked what was going on, Batman had already left, and he covered for him, which was surprising. But I like that version of Falcone a lot. This is my favorite.
Yeah. I would say that between the TV show Gotham, between Batman Begins,
That's right. Proud of him.
the animated version, and also the Batman, and we'll talk about it when we review the Batman next week, I believe.
Yeah.
Turturro was kind of like a unique choice to play Falcone because I don't know. I wasn't getting Falcone from him. I was getting a mob boss from him for sure, but I just couldn't really. He was he was more. And and again, I stress that we will dive into it in the movie, but the portrayal of the one the Batman made him look more rapey than did Crime Boss in a way, especially when he's with Selena Kyle. Sometimes I'm just like, Jesus, man, dude, get your hands off her. What's wrong with you? Get off.
Yeah, he didn't strike me as much as Falcone either. And I remember
He was less of a gentleman, is what I'm trying to say.
right. Whereas I did forget that you are right that the guy from Gotham, John Doe, he was great. I really liked his
He was
Falcone.
the best part of that TV adaptation, to my opinion.
Yeah, him and Penguin were my favorite bits in that series. But yeah, I forgot he's really good. I think that Tom Wilkinson could have done more if the focus was more on him and they gave him more scenes. But John Doman was just great as Falcone
And he had the benefit, and he had at least the benefit and what's the word I'm looking for? The benefit and the advantage of it being on a TV show because he had more to work with and he had much more room to flesh out that character. Which, say what you will about Gotham, and I've said plenty of it, he's the best part.
Yeah, he was really good for that show. So yeah, he would probably therefore be my favorite Falcone on screen after my top favorite, which is be the comic version of this guy. But so that was, and I also kind of like in The Long Halloween how he and it's again a Godfather thing. Keep your friends closer, your enemies closer, because he and Maroni are always inviting each other to the same functions and kind of focusing on what's going on. And at first, it just seemed like I thought Falcone would think Maroni was the one responsible for it because they were just hitting Falcone's nonstop in the first half of the year, or the year that starts from October through like February, and then it shifts suddenly to Maroni's guys.
Yeah.
And
my father always said, keep your enemies close and a gun closer.
Right, and that's the thing that when I was mentioning the fact that there's big gaps in the story, because they mentioned that there's this mob war going on, but the only violence you really see is the violence committed by the Holiday Killer. You don't really hear about like what's going on in this mob war, but multiple characters are talking about it, and the way that Falcone was talking about it with Batman, saying this Long Halloween, my people call it the Long Halloween, and it's your fault. And how and he talks about the mob war, but it's kind of interesting that the story never really shows you the actual mob war aspect of it, because even Falcone says is acknowledging that the Holiday Killer probably isn't a mobster thing; it's something else. He's not sure what it is, because much like in The Godfather, if you're going to knock off a bunch of people, that's going to start a lot of problems, which you kind of see in The Godfather a little bit, but here you don't really get it because they keep jumping in forward in time a lot.
Yeah.
Sort of like when it was as early as St. Patrick's Day where Harvey started thinking we should be looking at Bruce Wayne and doing this, and then it's not until like Mother's Day where they go to make the arrest for the grand jury indictment and stuff. I do like when they take their trips to Wayne Manor, though, and Harvey's just like, yeah, I haven't really made my way up here yet, and Alfred just keeps trying to tell him off, like, oh, Master Wayne may not be in tonight, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, I love that back and forth that all those characters have. It was like really, really, again, it's such great writing.
Also, never give Alfred an opening to be sassy, because when he sasses you, you're done. There's no coming back from an Alfred sass.
Oh, 100%.
Like, Alfred has said many times, I am a man who's a butler who waits hand and foot to a man who dresses as a bat. Do not mess with me. And he also worked under His Majesty's Secret Service. So really, do not mess with Alfred. He knows how to take you down with his mouth, and he does with a gun.
Yeah. So in short, we're going to be probably seeing a lot more of the Long Halloween influencing other Batman media going forward.
Yeah.
It's still.
I wouldn't be surprised if the Penguin TV show has some sprinkled essence in there, because they are going to be exploring the taking of the crime underbelly of Gotham. There's a vacuum right now, and who's going to be there to keep it all together? The Penguin, since Falcone isn't there anymore to keep everybody in check.
Yeah, and they did cast Clancy Brown as Maroni, which is a change, because you only see Maroni very briefly on the TV screen in the first movie, and he's like this really tall, skinny guy, and now they got Clancy Brown, which would be really fun.
I can't wait. That is going to be fantastic. He's going to be such a son of a bitch. I love it.
And there are rumors making the round that Paul Dano will be back as the Riddler in the movie Part 2.
That makes sense. Why not?
Another
What's
rumor,
from using him?
another rumor says that the Joker will be the main villain of Part 3, but who knows where those rumors are coming from? Could be, who knows?
I mean, who knows? We might get to see that Arkham Asylum adaptation.
That's right. That's actually the one I would be most excited to see, because it's like we always think when they're doing these new Batman movies, what villains would you want to see? Like even Christian Bale acknowledged in an interview when he was promoting Amsterdam, he's like, yeah, people ask him about Batman. He's like, the thing about Batman that really kind of annoys me is that the villains are always so cooler, so much cooler, more compelling, and that's why he sees why the fans get really into it, wondering who's the villain's going to be, because that's the thing that you really want to see in the new spin, and so. That's why I like the fact that the Arkham series is like, yeah, if we're only going to have like 3 movies and you're only going to have like 3 main villains or whatever, let's use the series to flesh out this tone version of it for those characters. And I really hope that comes to light.
And I do like it when you're reading the comic or you're watching the movie, you're always following Batman. You're always in the same pace that he is. You're trying to catch up with him. You might try to figure it out ahead of time to know what the twist is, but sometimes the script is 2 steps ahead of you, and that's what I like about when they do it right, is that you should never be ahead of Bruce, even though you know what's going on that he doesn't know because you're the audience. You should be as surprised as he is when he figures something out.
Right.
Because otherwise, then you're not doing your job as a storyteller and as a script writer as well. Because especially when you read in the comics, you're listening, you're reading what Bruce is thinking. You are following the clues that he's following. You might have an idea what's going to happen, and then when you get to the twist or what the reveal is, you're just like, I should have seen it coming. It should have been that one.
Right, and that's again key to the writing. Like you don't want to give away too much too early. Like even
which is what made Batman Eternal so great. All those 52 issues, you're trying to figure out who in the hell is pulling the strings here, who is bringing all these classic Batman characters, old and new, and when you figure out who it is, you're like, wait, who?
Yeah, and it's like that's kind of like when Scotty and I were reviewing the Bond series, we tended to have lower opinions of the movies where they tell you what the villain's plan is up front, and then you have to wait for James Bond to play catch up. Because it's like we're already been informed. Now we're waiting for our hero to figure it out so we can be back with him on the same page. And so that's why the Batman stories do that. Like even in Long Halloween, it's like in the scenes which are just with the villains, they're careful not to give away much information. It's more like character building scenes. Like the scene at the party, like after Bruce leaves saying, I'm not going to launder your money, you have all the character stuff going on with Carla and Johnny and Alberto, and it's like, and it's not giving away plot points. It's just setting up characters. And so you're not really, even with all the stuff with Harvey and Gilda and their relationship, like it's not giving away spoilers or things that put you ahead of Batman in the investigation. It's just helping build the character properly. So that's also really well done. And to that point, as well as will Long Halloween influence other things? I think also, I'm starting to think that the Batman Part 2 is no longer not simply a placeholder title. I think that's a deliberate play on like The Godfather Part 2. Because Reeves said it's going to be a crime saga, and so maybe it's going to have more allusions to the Long Halloween. Like I would love a singular mystery like that. I mean, we'll talk about it more next week in terms of how they do that with the Riddler story. But for the most part, I really did like this. My only surprise in the Long Halloween, given they got the Joker, the Riddler, Poison Ivy, Solomon, all these guys, I was just surprised that the Penguin didn't get his own little. Like he shows up at the very end there when when Harvey breaks them all out of Arkham to go to Carmine's headquarters, but he doesn't really get his own moment to shine or his own subplot or anything in the story like a lot of the other villains did.
Yeah, I would chalk that up to an editor thing. Yeah. Last thing I wanted to mention. I like it when you throw the Joker anywhere in a Batman story that doesn't need the Joker, but I like when the Joker is in there because one thing I've learned from reading comics, and I learned it very well when I read Crisis on Two Earths, or I think it was Infinite Crisis, the sequel to Crisis on Infinite Earths, is that the biggest mistake you can ever do is not include the Joker. And when you don't invite the Joker to play, he's not going to be happy. And I like how he just throws himself in there because he doesn't like that there's a new player in town sucking up all the oxygen that he would be doing it. So I'm just like, God damn, that is such a vintage Joker move.
Oh yeah,
And
like killing everybody in Gotham Square to at the very least upstage the Holiday Killer.
yeah, because it's just like even I, if I were in Batman's shoes, I'm just like, okay, it can't be the Joker. I mean, you could possibly make an argument that it could be him, but nah, that's not his style.
So speaking of which, since this is said to be in the continuity of year one, but not like they said they kind of axed the year two storyline to make this kind of their new year two in this sub continuity. I recall that the year one comic ended with the illusion that the Joker had poisoned the Gotham City water supply, which is a storyline that's picked up in a story called Batman: The Man Who Laughs, which
Mhm.
is actually a much more recent comic than Batman Year One. So, I guess I got the vibe while I was reading The Long Halloween that the Joker's kind of a new player. Uh, like Batman, it didn't seem like he knew him very well, did he? Or
I have to relook it, but at least in the adaptation, he's already been there, done that.
yeah, because the mobsters who are going around like when Batman's interrogating, they're talking about like they don't seem to know who the Joker was. Like he's just some psycho that just kind of showed up out of nowhere to interrogate them about the Holiday Killer. And they're like, "What the hell, man? Who are you?" And when Batman was interrogating them about it, it's clear that the mobsters have no clue who the Joker is. Not in terms of what his real identity is, but like they'd never heard of the Joker before.
Yeah, but I think that can also just fall in line if with the continuity that was there. I mean, their first encounter. I mean, not including the killing joke, but the Joker really does just show up, and it's about who is this guy?
Right,
And
because again, The Man Who Laughs was pitched as a sequel to Year One, picking up on the plot thread of Joker poisoning the Gotham River.
mhm.
And this movie, or I mean, this comic, The Long Halloween, it doesn't mention any of the plot points from Year One, even though it's clearly a year. This is a Year Two story. Uh, but I
It's
just noticed
also
that.
one of those. It's also one of those series that, and a lot of people can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's one of those series that isn't really within continuity, but eventually gets absorbed into the mainline continuity because at the time it was its own prestige series when it was coming out. It didn't have a numbering; it was just like a long form graphic novel. So, and the same thing happened with The Killing Joke. The Killing Joke was its own separate one shot, doesn't really have anything to do with the main Batman storyline, but eventually they folded it into Barbara being in a wheelchair and thus becoming Oracle in the comics. So it's
Right.
one of those things where Tim Sale and Jeff Loeb have one story in mind, but then the higher ups say, you know what, this should be in continuity. Let's throw it.
Yeah. Kind of like when the New 52 line launched, and you figured out as you're reading it, certain other stories must be still canon based on other characters who show up or other seemingly throwaway lines of dialogue. It's like, oh, you must already know this person, or this must have happened. And
Yeah, problem one of the main and I think is the biggest problem with the New 52 was they shaved off 10 years of storytelling within within continuity, not in real world because you can't it's established that in the DC universe 10 to 15 years have passed by since everything. And you have to also account uh crisis events that kind of reset everything, flashpoints, um um uh origin stories changing, timelines changing. So everything has happened between 15 to 20 years, more or less. But when you kind of take away 10 years, like a whole decade of storytelling, and everything that we've known so far in the New 52 happened in 5 years, you mean to tell me in 5 years we had Dick Grayson, age 12, we had Tim Drake, we had Jason Todd, and we had a 13-year-old Damian Wayne? That makes no sense.
yeah, that's the part what threw me because I figured, oh, the New 52 is going to be accessible, and that's why I was excited to start reading it because it's kind of intimidating to figure out how do I make the jump from the graphic novels, which were mostly accessible standalones, to the main continuity.
Yeah.
And a few pages into the first one, which is Court of Owls, he comes up from the Batcave to find, Dick Grayson, Jason Todd, Damian Wayne. It's like, wait, what? And Tim Drake. Like,
But it wasn't a full reboot because a full reboot is you're starting from page one. Everything that came before is gone. And the New 52 did not commit to it. They just choked. I don't know what the decisions were in the boardrooms when this happened, but it kind of felt like this was it. Everything you read before, say goodbye. We are no longer going to reference it. We are starting fresh. And when I mean fresh, I mean anybody can We can change genders. We can change ethnicities. We can change how this started. Nope, they kept it the status quo. They just shaved off 10 years. So in 5 years, we have all the Robins. We have all the main rogues gallery for every single villain. Wonder Woman's origin again changes once more. You have the Green Lantern War still happen. The Sinestro Corps War still happen. All the Crisis events happened. The Dark Side events happened. Everything happened in 5 goddamn years.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Scotty says in the comments, there will always be a dinosaur in the Batcave.
Yes. No matter how many reboots, there will always be a dinosaur.
Speaking of which, we do have a lot of comments here. Let's see. We have Tom Jr. Jackson saying hello to everybody. Hello, Tom.
Tommy.
And Edge of Time sending us some fire, money, and other things. Scotty saying hello there, and hellos in the comments. Oh, Tom says also, there is so much Batman films and animated films out there, and there is just so much lore to pick and choose from. Definitely. And you see this picking from all sorts of different storylines in the various movies, and even comics alluding to other previous comics. Even if they're not canon, they'll have a little bit of a tinge in there.
Yeah.
Let's see. Yes. That's right. Yeah, Scott says, true story. I'm always curious to see how long-awaited adaptations for this. Yeah, true. And how long-awaited adaptations for the screen. Yeah, all of us are, as Tom is as well. And Scotty says he is totally fine with the Batman Part 2 as a title. Yeah, because I believe that does feed into, again, the Godfather Part 2 and the idea that Reeves said from the beginning this was meant to be a trilogy. And I think, unlike other people who say we're going to do a trilogy and don't plan it out, I have a feeling that Reeves actually did, because I mean, this Penguin series is coming along pretty quickly, considering that the movie only came out last March and they've already started filming. So now Scotty says, sometimes I want the Joker to stay away so I can anticipate him. Even the card at the end of Batman Begins is enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of felt that way with the Batman. I didn't feel they needed the Joker cameo in there unless they're trying to set up the war of jokes and riddles. But I didn't mind that he was already in prison, because we've had a lot of stories of them meeting for the first time.
I never worry about passage of time in Batman storytelling. I just let it slide. Is that a jab at me?
No, that's just Scotty, like, not worrying about it. It's not so much that the passage of time is the issue. It's the fact that they're telling everybody this is a hard reboot, and then all of a sudden you have 5 characters from all sorts of way ahead in the back. Like, you didn't tell the stories of any of them, of how they got there or why they're there. Oh, hey, Tom. So thanks.
Because even when the New 52 happened, Jeff Johns was still telling his magnum opus in the Green Lantern books, and nothing changed there. But everything happened in 5 years, which again is one of the main criticisms of the New 52. And granted, we went back to DC Rebirth, and then we had the Doomsday Clock crossover between the Watchmen universe and the Batman universe and the DC universe, and eventually the end result there was that everything matters, but every few years there's always going to be a change, and the one thing that's always going to remain constant is Superman and where he comes from.
Right.
Sorry if I spoiled it for people, but that is the goal.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Scotty says he does get the problem with the Robins. Yeah, that's kind of what the primary thing was, because that was sort of like a springboard for other things. Because once you have the Robins there, and it's like, okay, well, now those stories are canon. Well, what other stories are canon? I think I would have been fine if they had like a little key at the beginning of the book telling you which stories were still canon, just kind of, because obviously you're not starting from the very beginning with the pearls in Crime Alley, and so it'd be fine to say certain things are there to have a basis to jump from, as opposed to just being like, oh, we're all in media res. But yeah, what did you think on Scotty's earlier comment about being fine that the Joker can sometimes stay away, like having the card at the end of Batman Begins is enough, and not necessarily needing him in every Batman story?
It depends, because I remember a comment that our mutual friend Ben Robertson said that you're always going to be looking forward for the next Batman and Joker confrontation. Like, every new iteration of the Batman, every new starting point, you're always going to wonder, when are we going to get the Joker? When is he going to come in? How is he going to come in? So I think everybody's always going to want to have to get their hands on it. And you can always tease them here and there. I remember in Scott Snyder's, we didn't start, technically speaking, we didn't start with the Joker. We started with Court of Owls. And in the Detective Comics that was being written and drawn by Tony S. Daniel, the Joker makes an appearance, but he disappears after carving out his face, and he doesn't come back until Death of the Family, where he comes back with his rotten face in there, and that was the next Joker story after Grant Morrison's run of the character. So I always want to see a new interpretation of the Joker, but I do agree that he is, not to make a pun here, the trump card of the DC universe when you think about it. When it comes to a Batman storytelling, you can it does in a way um overshadow the potential of other villains in Batman's rogues gallery we haven't seen. We haven't seen a live adaptation of the Mad Hatter. We haven't seen Maximilian Zeus. We haven't seen Grundy. We haven't seen a new interpretation of Poison Ivy and all that stuff. But if what we've been talking about, they are kind of either setting up a War of Jokes and Riddles or an Arkham Asylum adaptation, you kind of need the Joker for those.
Yeah.
And it does make sense that if you're introducing or at least teasing him, it does work with the term the inmates are running the asylum. So I wouldn't be surprised if the Joker is way ahead of his plans for the Batman moving forward.
Sort of like they had in Batman Begins, where Scarecrow technically wasn't an inmate, but he was running the asylum, and he is crazy.
Exactly. But I have to imagine that the script for part 3 is already done, and Matt Reeves and co spent time pumping out the scripts for part 2 and part 3. Yeah, they might make some changes here or there, but I would have to believe that that script is already done, because I want to make sure that when he's done with the part 2, they're ready to go for part 3. Unless, of course, they're planning on shooting part 2 and part 3 back to back, which they totally should.
Yeah, because they start shooting in November, November 23rd.
Yeah, I think it would make sense if they do film them back to back. That way, it's already in the can, done. You don't have to worry about getting your actors back. It's all in the budget. If they're committed to the trilogy, it should be done that way.
Yeah. So that brings us to the end of the comments. Any other final thoughts on The Long Halloween?
Oh, I think it's great, whether you're reading it from the comic or you're watching the animated movie, or if you don't want either and you want just to watch a good old fashioned Batman movie, watch the Dark Knight trilogy, watch the new Batman movie, watch anything that came before. You're gonna enjoy Batman either way, and they all have a little bit of the Long Halloween. You son of a bitch, Scotty R37. How are you?
I broke out of Arkham.
I can tell he's got.
You got your stripes on.
I do. I'm using the microphone to cover the number.
So
Yeah.
What do you think of The Long Halloween, Scott? Either the comic or the movie or whichever.
Heavens. Sorry, guys. What is this? Here we go. Hopefully everything's going to be okay.
We had such a good flow, Scotty.
No, it was my fault. I jumped in halfway through a show. I don't want to mess up your vibe. Just pretend I'm not here. No, just really interesting conversation. I read the book. I haven't had a chance to see the movie yet, so I wasn't qualified. And in all honesty, I had a puppy problem. But everything's fine. Everything's fine now. How are you?
Oh, I'm good.
Everything's fine. Your situation's normal.
Yes.
Exactly. But I thought it was really interesting just because I wanted to express it in terms of the Joker about not being necessary in every single story. Like even when we talked about Mask of the Phantasm, it was like, do you have to shove the Joker in here? But yeah, they did to sell the cartoon. So
yeah, I do agree. You don't always need him, but he is the trump card. He is the big draw. And as we've seen with Joaquin Phoenix Joker, as we've seen with Heath Ledger's Joker, he's pop culture Viagra. People are going to want to see him. But I like that. But I like that filmmakers now, whenever they do get their hands on a Batman property, which we're going to get in the upcoming part 2 and part 3, or if we're going to get with The Brave and the Bold, that there is the creative inspiration to try something different before they get, because everybody wants to get their hands on the Joker. They all want to do their interpretation. But the challenge of not doing the Joker, that's where you really get to see the creative juices, because I'm not gonna say I don't want to say it's easy, but it is easy at this point to do a Joker story because you have a lot to draw from. But it really can be it really could be a good challenge if you try to take somebody else from the Rogues Gallery and prop them up and really tell a quintessential story with them. And I believe filmmakers should have the opportunity to do that more than go to the golden apple that is the Joker.
Well, I also, to that end, saw a lot of parallels in the version of Two-Face in The Long Halloween that is also in The Dark Knight, because in both versions, he's specifically trying to go out. He's done with the bad guys. Like, I'm done with you guys. I'm just going to kill you now. And granted, in The Long Halloween, it's implied that he may have been doing it before he became Two-Face as well. And again, he's more flippant and has that great sense of humor and stuff that Gordon's not really on board with. Whereas in The Dark Knight, he's a bit more of the White Knight type thing. Like, he doesn't really joke about that type of stuff, even though the Two-Face is more along those lines. So it's like, I like this Harvey Dent better than the Dark Knight version. And of course, the Dark Knight is the one I tend to reference the most because those are the two most popular, like, well-known in the zeitgeist or whatever. Because I like the amount of time that Long Halloween gets to spend with Harvey, and I just like his personality and everything, and it's really fun, especially since they do keep you genuinely guessing as to whether or not it's him. Like when Gilda confronts him in the basement saying, since when do you bring home evidence? And he's like, I do it all the time kind of thing. And he gets really defensive at one point when she's accusing him about it, sort of. So I kind of like that because on the one hand, Harvey isn't necessarily wrong because it's like, well, Gordon always obsessed with doing things by the book, but he has no problem with letting Batman break almost every law in the book to get it done. And so he's like, is it really that much of a further step that I'm taking if I push this a little further? Like if he were to swipe some of the mob's money, is that really that different than letting Batman go beat the shit out of criminals and pummel them to a bloody pulp? Is that as serious of a crime as stealing? Obviously, it's a more serious crime to beat the hell out of people than it is to just swipe some mob money, you know? So I like the fact that Harvey's flippant about that because he doesn't ever explicitly say it, but you can tell he's thinking in his conversations with Gordon. It's like, dude, we're working with Batman. It's like, we can't like take a chill pill, you know? So I do like that personality of Harvey better than the full-on, totally innocent White Knight version from The Dark Knight. But I get it. Dark Knight's a shorter movie. You don't have as much real estate, so you can't really play around with and it's not a mystery. The Dark Knight wasn't a mystery story, whereas this one is, so it helps flesh out the character more and flesh out that mystery. But I really did like the Two-Face version here.
Yeah. I've always seen it as Batman getting his hands dirty so that Jim Gordon doesn't. And
well, they look plenty dirty from here.
Which is kind of the same thing that Batman infers back to Falcone when he confronts him at the penthouse. And Falcone's like, oh, the stuff you do to keep you think your hands are clean and all this, you know? And which is a line that comes back in The Dark Knight Rises when Bane gave his speech and Gordon's telling Robin, like, who are you to talk down to me? It's like, you want somebody else to plunge their hands into the filth so you can keep yours clean. And Robin very correctly points out, well, you may not have been literally the one who did it, but you're still been in league with it and on board with it for quite a while. You know, your hands look plenty filthy to me.
Well, I'm not disproving it. I'm just saying Batman takes away the temptation of what a corrupt cop would do, and he's incorruptible. That's the point.
Yep.
Well, but the weird thing about it, and it just sparks a conversation about the nature of the relationship between Jim and Bruce, is what does Batman offer the police force? It's more than just beating the crap out of criminals and leaving them behind. Like, there are tools they show, and I'm going to mainly reference, because it's been a while since I've actually really invested in the DC comic book universe. Yeah, it's like, based on the movies, Batman gives tools to Gordon that he can surreptitiously insert into investigations that would go through proper channels. But he's also muscle.
Mm-hmm.
And so there are things that, Commissioner Gordon is corrupt in a different way. He's just taking different kinds of bribes.
Well, yeah,
Information.
sort of like when Dent specifically in The Dark Knight asks Batman, like he reminds him that Lau's in Hong Kong and there's not going to be any extradition under any circumstances, but he still tells him directly, I need him back. So he's basically asking him, without literally asking him, I need you to go kidnap this guy, which is totally cool. And so like Harvey's willing to cross the line and Gordon was nervous about it, but he still went through with it, you know? And that's why I thought in the scene when Gilda says, oh, Harvey, we can't afford this new house, you know, after their old one blew up. And he says, oh, you're right, we can't afford it. But she's understandably worried about it, and he's not. But they never really resolve, like, why is he not concerned? Which is why I started thinking, did Harvey secretly swipe some of the money from the warehouse before they set it on fire? I know Batman's like, don't even think about it. But he could have. You never know. It's like, because again, what's the more serious crime? Swiping some dirty money or going overseas to kidnap somebody and beating criminals to a pulp? That kind of thing.
Also,
Yeah, but
really thinking about the money scene in The Dark Knight. I have to imagine, now that I think about it, because I wasn't back then, I have to imagine the Joker has been stealing more than just one bank, because I can't imagine all that money piled up there fit in all those duffel bags in the beginning.
Well, they said he hit 5 banks.
Okay, thank you, because
Yeah,
I kept wrestling. Did I miss something? He did not stick all that money in there.
Because Gordon told Batman in the bank vault that this bank makes another drop for the mob that makes 5.
Okay, thank you. I forgot. For whatever reason, that line always escapes me, and I always have to. I'm always confused when I see the mountain of money. I'm just like, how, you son of a bitch? How?
Well, don't forget, it is the Joker, and so every time he kills somebody, he might look at it like a Mario killing a Goomba, and it's like, don't forget the coins.
Oh no! Mamma mia.
After all, like you mentioned, he does kill a Luigi in this one.
Kill Luigi.
But that's just, yeah. So I do like that whole dynamic going between Gordon, Harvey, and Batman. That like
I do admit that you could have the argument that his hands are as dirty because he's relying on the Batman to, in a way, break the law, go places where the police shouldn't go because they could be thrown out of court. But I think that conversation kind of becomes moot when it comes to the freaks. Then that's when you really do need the Batman to rein them in.
And that's also kind of the logic that Gilda used, because she's like, yeah, so that Gotham is so corrupt and it's such a revolving door, Arkham or the prison, it doesn't really make a difference. So the only way to really stop this is to kill these people. And
never going to happen.
Right. And Batman obviously would never be on board with that. And which is why he's quick to put that down, even when Harvey teases that idea. But there
have been stories where people take it upon themselves to go after the rogues, and Batman has to stop them from committing a crime that even he wouldn't do. Because imagine if somebody were this close to taking out even the Joker, said they had the Joker at point blank range, the Batman would stop that murder, even though it would solve a lot of problems. Batman just can't allow it.
Yeah, that was something that we pointed out, that I think it was Wesley Strick who did the uncredited rewrite of Batman Returns, who said, no, you got to kill Heath Ledger's Joker. This guy proved he can break out of any prison. He blew up a hospital, and it's only by the speed of the evacuation that nobody died. And now he's going to blow up these therapist. I know, you got to kill, like, your code at this point. It's like, how different is this from being in an actual war zone where a soldier has to kill somebody else and you don't have a whole crisis of conscience or trial? But like, no, you got to kill the Joker.
Oh, Kat, don't do that. You just made the Dark Knight bigger than Batman.
And then that's when you get the Punisher Batman that Scott Snyder did after Dark Knight's Metal.
That was something that Batman alluded to when they finally caught Alberto in the aisle, and he's like, now as Batman, he's like, part of my job is to delve out the punishment, and he seems to take a joy in actually beating the hell out of Alberto, who's a skinny little guy. Like, he didn't need to beat him up that much. He got him in the first punch, but he just keeps dealing it out because he's like, I gotta deal out the punishment. It's like, Jesus.
He's also pretty upset.
Yeah, and he broke both of Alberto's arms as well when he did that, because he's got his arms in cast after that.
And he is still learning to temper his rage. That's also something to remember.
Right.
Because he's still early in his career. He hasn't really solidified what his war on crime is as the Batman. He's still a young detective by that point. So he's learning how to check his anger, but also how to be the quintessential Batman.
That's right, because Gordon does tell him that at one point, that you could learn to be a better detective, than just, going and beating up criminals all the time isn't the answer.
Yeah. And the other times where he's actually gone pretty far into beating someone to the point of causing some irreparable damage is when it becomes personal, when the Bat family's involved, or when it's one of the freaks, when it's the Joker going after the Bat family, when he went after Barbara. Or when Damian Wayne died in the comics at one point, there was a single comic book issue where there's no dialogue, it's just artwork, and he is rounding about 100 criminals, and he's beating the shit out of them to the point where where they go up to the roof and they see the bat signal turned on, and there are a bunch of guys just knocked out, bleeding, bruised up because he was just pissed off.
You see, that's why I found it interesting that in the course of the Long Halloween, Gordon was much quicker to believe that Harvey would be the holiday killer, but he never seemed to suspect that Batman might. Because again, this is only year 2; they don't know each other that well yet, and that's why I was kind of surprised in the course of the story that Batman never really comes under suspicion as being a potential holiday killer, because people might speculate that, well, he's a vigilante, and these criminals through this revolving door type system, and nothing getting done. Maybe he snapped. Nobody really suspects that, which I thought was interesting. And maybe that's done for the sake of keeping the focus on Batman, maybe. I mean, you do get the bit where Falcone hires the Riddler to help him solve the mystery, but I thought it would have been interesting to point if one of them had pointed the finger at Batman.
Yeah, and that's what a good detective would do. He would put everybody as a potential suspect, even the guy who said that he's supposed to be the protector, which Batman just like, yeah, but you're still a vigilante. You do have motive.
Yeah.
I maybe never seen you wield a gun, but who's to say you can't or wouldn't?
Another little tidbit I remember from the movie version is that Selina Kyle makes the mistake of identifying Batman on the yacht by calling him Bruce, and Alberto hears her. He's like, Bruce Wayne? And he keeps calling him Bruce at that point, and Batman doesn't correct him or anything. He's like, yes, and he kind of admits it. He's like, yes, I'm Bruce, and you're the holiday killer. And that's why I guess in the movie they had to make the point that he was clearly dead from getting chopped up in the propeller, because when in the movie I'm like, whoa, because I didn't know they were going to change the story to have Alberto not be the guy. So when he heard that, I'm like, geez, how are they going to get around that? Because Batman didn't deny it or anything; he just kind of admitted it, and then I'm like, oh, okay.
Okay, but real quick, say he gets off the yacht scot-free, and he says, guys, did you know that Bruce is Batman? Would somebody really stop to think that through?
But we addressed this in Hush as well. Like, even, okay, so you know who Batman is. Does that make it a big deal? And then Riddler is like, yeah, what is a Riddler if everybody knows the answer?
Yeah, it just depends on the source and where it's coming from and what state of mind they are when they say it. Because if you walk into a bar and say, hey, guys, guess who the Batman is? Bruce Wayne. They're going to laugh him out of the bar.
Right.
And do you really want to be the person who blurts that out to a criminal organization? To be like, you get the hell out of here and stop making jokes.
We'll even look at Coleman Reese. Hey, I know who Batman is, and Lucius is like, so.
Well, Coleman had some evidence to try and back that up. It's just that Lucius said you're probably going to get, implies that he's going to come kill you or beat the hell out of you if you go through with it.
Well, if he can't become like I enjoy that scene because Coleman Reese can become a criminal, or he can shut up.
Oh,
hey,
hey,
hey, Mega Reacts, thank you, and I appreciate 420. Yeah, exactly. But who's he going to go to? He's going to go to the criminals. Well, then Batman's going to find him, or it's like, okay, so now what do we do?
Well, he doesn't
at least Coleman Reese has the blueprints to make a case against him being Batman.
Yeah.
But then after he saves him, he's just like, okay, I'll keep my mouth shut.
But there might be some sort of simplicity of the sorts in the Long Halloween version of Gotham. After all, there was the scene when Vernon is handing Sal Maroni the bag that he lies and says contains meds when it's actually acid. The bag that he's holding says on it Gotham drugs. I thought, okay,
drugs.
Not RX like for a drugstore, just Gotham drugs. Captain Infinity says, I thought Scotty had a mustache.
I did. Like, I was growing a beard for a little bit, and I realized I had never, shaved the mustache so that it would look like anything. And the picture exists, but I didn't keep it for long. It was so weird. I went to stores for like half a day, and I was like, no, this is not my jam.
Captain Infinity says, just get off the yacht, Scott.
That's how I got off of Arkham
You know what
Island.
You could pull off, Scott? The Van Dyke.
No, you know what? I don't. Nah, thanks though.
Okay.
Appreciate it. No,
just trying to help.
No, I appreciate it.
It would be very distinguished.
Hey, lemon pie.
Lemon.
Bring out the pie.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm just getting Mega React.
You're 37 late.
Of course.
But yeah,
I,
a great comic and a gorgeous omnibus to reprinted in with the glossy artwork. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Easy.
Also, I like how Grundy is just a puppy in this storyline. He's just a puppy.
Yeah, because he gets all he says is Solomon Grundy born on a Monday, and then Grundy's kind of surprised when Harvey finishes the whole poem and the whole nursery rhyme, and how Bruce feels kind of bad because he manages. I mean, Bruce does beat him up a bit, or Batman, I should say, to get him to release Mickey, but he does I guess feel bad for it, so he brings him some Thanksgiving dinner.
Yeah. I think my favorite. There have been a lot of great Grundy moments, and at least in the Justice League animated series and in the movies, especially Batman, Superman, Public Enemies. My favorite moment in that adaptation is Grundy goes, "Grundy don't feel so good," and Batman's like, "Grundy gonna feel a lot worse," and beats the crap out of him. And you never know which Grundy you're gonna get. Sometimes you'll get Puppy Grundy. Other times you're gonna get Hulk Grundy. And other times you get Crime Boss Grundy, which he's super smart and super strong, so that's also formidable.
Mm-hmm.
kind of like Mr. Fix-It when the Hulk wears a suit.
Or the Maestro, in a way, yeah.
Is it the Maestro? No, Mr. Fix-It is Wolverine. I forget. Anyway, wrong universe.
Wrong universe.
Oh, but yeah. Anyway.
How many batarangs do we give this cat?
Yeah.
10 batarangs.
Oh, wow.
Well, for the comic.
Okay.
I agree. I give the comic a 10 as well.
Yeah, the comic is a 10. The movie,
you said it was your favorite animated.
No, the movie.
Your favorite animated adaptation.
Yeah, it's up there. It didn't feel too. I can't remember what I gave the other ones. This was pretty good, so I would give this maybe a 7 batarangs, because it does feel a bit jarring that they don't have as much of the character development in the movie as they do in the comic. Like, for instance, the whole beginning from the comic at the party where you're introduced to all the Falcone and the Maronis and what's going on with the bank, all that kind of stuff is skipped over. It almost begins pretty much with the murder of Johnny Beatty, which is you're skipping quite a lot for the beginning of the story in the movie. So that was a bit jarring decision. And then again, I thought it was inventive while they came up with the solution in the movie to say that Gilda was pretty much the only holiday killer. But I still think that when you try and think that out logically, even in the context of the comic, that's a little bit contrived. But it's still enjoyable. Would I watch it again? Maybe not, because I read the comic faster than it took to watch the movie. And I just love the comic so much more. It's like these movies, they're serviceable, but I mean, I wasn't over the moon about it. So maybe I'd have to double check what I gave the Hush movie. If I gave that an 8, I suppose I could give The Long Halloween an 8. But
I have it around here somewhere.
In the meantime, what did you give? How many batarangs would you give the movie, Ernesto?
I would give it an 8, simply not because of it as just an adaptation. I would just give it an 8 because with their doing a new animated continuity, it's very accessible. And if you can make something that's very accessible, even if the comic itself is also very accessible for people who want to read it, at least for the movies, it's something that I can see people really revisiting because it's very gorgeous looking animation. They have very good choreography and lighting in the scenes. It's a new look and feel. I like it when there are quiet moments where there's no music and they just rely on the sound effects, especially when Batman is chasing Catwoman across the roof and you listen to the rain, you listen to the splashes, and you're following them. So I give it an 8 just because it's fun. It doesn't overcomplicate the mystery. You can follow it very well. You have great voice talents, and it all kind of wraps up nicely. Is it different? Yes, I would put the comic over the adaptation, but as an adaptation, you could do worse. And I'm glad that they did in 2 parts by trying to just encompass it all, because they could have easily cut it at the knees and just do it all in 90 minutes, and you would be missing a lot.
Yeah.
So you guys both gave it 10s in the comic book division.
Mm-hmm.
And you, Kat, so far you said 7?
Yeah, I think. Did you find what I rated the other ones?
I did. I'm getting to it. And Ernesto, you gave it an 8.
Yes.
Okay, in the movie.
Yeah.
Okay. For Hush, is Ernesto, you gave the movie 7.5, you gave the comic 9.
Mm.
Kat, you also gave the comic 9. Kat, you gave the movie 7 as well.
Okay, yeah, I give this one 7. Really good. Some of the changes, thinking it logically, no. Some of the voices didn't work for me. And then I just thought it was a bit abrupt how it just jumps very quickly to Johnny V's dead and we're on with the story as opposed to setting up some of these characters. But yeah, it's still enjoyable.
Well, good. I'm looking forward to watching it, and it's what, 3 hours?
Yeah, 2 hours, 48 minutes, but that includes the end credits. And there is a post-credit scene to part 1, by the way.
Okay.
Yeah, at the cemetery.
But I'm pretty sure you can rent the one part completely. The
Right.
new one that came out where it has both.
I looked.
You can rent it.
It might. I don't know. It could be licensing.
I will
regional.
give you an early Christmas present then. How about that?
Oh, that sounds delightful. We already know. Don't do it for something that you already reviewed. The whole point of sending me something is so that I can help review it.
Well,
It's too late. I missed the bus, and it is something I will.
Over, so accept the gift.
All right, I'll accept the gift.
Yeah,
I accept your grace.
I like that in the little avatar that Ernesto has. It shows how it's a combination of the blue, but also with some of the elements colored in. This is one of the other reprints where it's just all blue.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of like the Ernesto's better because it does help some of the characters pop a bit. Because like here's the Joker down here. You've got like Catwoman, Two-Face, the Jack-o'-lantern. I think it would look better if it was pop. They did put out a hardcover deluxe edition, which didn't come with it would have been great if it came with like a glossy book jacket. But it doesn't. It's like a hardcover, but it has all the same content as this behemoth down here, which is the deluxe editions of Haunted Night, Long Halloween, Dark Victory, and When in Rome.
Is that how you work out? Just by picking that book up?
I could do that, yes.
At this point, she could. She's got a lot of ego to press on.
No, she's got a library. It's impressive.
I know. I always tell her that's a lot of ego you got there. All those writers and artists.
Yeah.
Trying to one-up each other about who can write the best Batman series.
And this one specifically is just the Jeff Loeb with the Tim Sale. They don't have, therefore, the Hush storylines in there because that's with Jim Lee.
Yeah.
But I already have that paperback. They've put out deluxe versions of that too, but I have the original trade paperback, which is cool because they don't really they tend to put out. You know?
I'm now trying to imagine if instead of Jim Lee, it would have been Tim Sale who did Hush. Like just visually speaking, I would have loved to see how that all would look under Tim Sale's penmanship.
But also, don't forget that the artist's flourish is also in the acting of the characters, and so tonally, it would be completely different, just in terms of how he draws the particular motions that are called for in any scene. Yes, still, like the artist's fingerprint is an incredible conversation. I think it would be completely different if it was Tim Sale. Is it Tim Sale or Tim Sale? I always do this.
I think it's Tim Sale.
Okay, we're good with it. Fine. Tim Sale. But yeah, I think it would be completely different if Hush was drawn by Tim Sale.
So
visually, it would have been a different language. I agree. I'm just saying because of at this point, you can call it a legendary pair up, kind of like the Spielberg to the John Williams or the Scorsese to the Robert De Niro when it comes to Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale. I'm just saying that just imagine for a moment, same script, just Tim Sale drawing it from start to finish.
Oh no, and I understand. I understand the qualification.
It would be less pen up and more watercolors, I would say.
Visually, yeah. I'm thinking of the emotional touch of the artist and how they would make people gesture in particular situations.
True.
So what rating would you give the comic, Scott? You've read that, right?
I have. And for the comic, I think I gave the comic a 10 because of my affection for the Riddler. I'm going to give the Long Halloween. I'm going to give it a 10. And I do, again, it's the dream team of Jeff Loeb and Tim Saleh. And I really, going through everything in a like almost a noir. I'm usually not a fan of the gangland aspect. I like the freaks. I don't really care about the mobsters of Gotham. And so, yeah, I highly regard Long Halloween in spite of sort of the gangsters. So I don't really, when it turned out to be Angelo being the
Alberto.
holiday, Alberto, I'm sorry, so many O's.
Racist.
Not well, maybe, sure. They both had vowels. It's like I misspelled something on the. I don't know.
Angelo.
I'm digging myself. So yeah, I didn't care.
Okay.
I was just glad to see the showcase of the villains on the broad strokes of the underworld of Gotham, which is, again, something that I never cared too much about. So yeah, I would give it a 10 as well, because it was engaging, and I liked the steps along the way. I love the art. The twists were great, and it's obvious what has been lifted from it to help inspire other works.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, so that's Long Halloween. Any other comments in the chat?
Gesundheit. I said hello to Lemon, and I posted Mega Reacts, his YouTube channel. People should subscribe and watch. Thank you for being here, and thank you for your generosity.
Yeah.
All right, so we'll be seeing more Long Halloween inspired content next week when we review The Batman.
The Batman. First
Or
time viewing for me.
Or as Scotty would always say, The Batman.
Oh, come on. That's Cillian Murphy. Yeah, yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I can't wait to see it.
Cillian says it.
The Batman.
The Batman.
The Batman.
Well, I don't think I get to say. I'm not supposed to say the closing line tonight. It's not my job.
Then I will do it in your place. Kat, I never said thank you.
And you'll never have to.